Gorif. I'm from Guarda Wallet, and I just would like to introduce my colleague David and Seth, our guest.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you. Hi, Seth.
Hey, um, yeah, I would like to say that this is an AMA session of one of the most private cryptocurrency in the market, Monero, and I think that David can say some words about our guests. Can you introduce our guest, please?
Absolutely. Today we have Seth for Privacy, an organizer of Monero Space. And Seth, could you tell us a bit about yourself, about what you do at Monero?
Yeah, so obviously Monero has no company or corporation or VC funding or anything behind it. So in order for Monero to grow, for it to improve technically, for the community to grow, regular people just have to step up and volunteer and help out. So I'm just a regular person who's chosen to dedicate a lot of my free time to Monero. Specifically, I'm part of the Monero Space community work group, which is essentially just a group of people who kind of share a focus on how we should grow Monero. Part of that is doing education. Part of that is doing some interviews with merchants and different people within the Monero ecosystem. But I'm not a dev, so I don't write code for Monero. But my main focus is really educating users, helping to distill technical topics for less technical users, and just helping to spread the word on how Monero can be a useful tool and how important privacy is in general to people's lives, whether they realize it or not.
Great.
Yeah, I just would like to remind everybody that you can join Guarda Wallet, and you also can win one XMR just for your question, guys. So we will send and we will award actually for the best question, or probably for two best questions. So it's up to you, Seth. Okay, that's up to you. So, yeah, you can choose. You can choose. Yeah, you can choose in the end of the session. And so my first question is about everyday use of Monero. So could you please tell us about that? Because we have quite a lot of clients who already used Monero, but still they just really interested in that.
Yeah. So I'll just quickly go over what Monero is. So Monero essentially just aims to be money. It aims to be similar to cash, kind of a digital cash. And in order to be good money, something has to have real privacy that's provided by default for all users. And it needs to protect every user's right to financial privacy without them needing to jump through extra hoops or having to do anything extra. So the real goal with Monero is that anyone using Monero via any wallet, be it Guarda wallet, Cake wallet, Monero, any desktop wallet, anything that they want to use when they're using Monero on the Monero network, they're gaining very strong financial privacy that protects themselves, protects the person they're sending to, and protects the amounts that are involved in that transaction. So because Monero aims to be digital cash, it aims to be good money, it's really its main use is as money. I mean, what do you do with money? You spend it, you go to a merchant, you go to a shop, you go to dinner, you buy something online, you buy some t-shirts, you buy whatever, and you can use Monero in many of those places. There's lots of merchants that accept it right now, and many are accepting it more and more every day. But the other kind of main use case is similar to kind of Bitcoin's narrative right now, which is a store of value. You can use Monero to protect your wealth against inflation. You can use it to protect your wealth against seizure by potentially an authoritarian government or something like that. You can use it to protect your wealth while you're immigrating to a new country. There are lots of ways that it can also be used to protect your wealth, in addition to being something that you can spend and use as just part of your daily life.
Mm-hmm. David, you've got a question, right?
Yeah, actually from Bakus Giller. Monero offers awesome features for the people who care about their privacy. How will people get their money in cash? It makes no sense to use CEXs to get the money through banks after using Monero. What are the solutions of Monero team for this?
Yes, that's a very common question. Because of the strong privacy that's afforded by Monero by default to all users, and because of how well it works, governments and banks, while there are no laws against using Monero, buying Monero, owning Monero, that I know of anywhere in the world, even in especially in countries like the US, much of Europe, there are definitely no laws against it. The governments put pressure on exchanges that want to list Monero through the banks that they have to use because they don't like their citizens, they don't like regular people getting access to strong privacy features. So because of that, there have been some exchange delistings. There are still many exchanges that list Monero and allow you to buy it with regular fiat, regular cash, dollars, euros, all of that. Like, for example, a very large exchange in the US is Kraken, and they have supported Monero for a very long time. You can buy Monero via that centralized exchange. But because of how well Monero works, we know that pressure will be coming. Hopefully, it will never actually cause a delisting across all centralized exchanges, because that would be incredibly harmful to people's access to a great privacy tool. But in the eventuality that that does happen, the Monero community is very aware that that is a risk that would cause it to be more difficult for people to access and use Monero. So we're building out a lot of things that can help to onboard users into Monero when they don't have any. There's a great community resource called Local Monero, which is essentially a site where you can just connect with other people and buy Monero directly from them. That could be cash face-to-face. That could be a bank transfer. There are lots of different payment options that are available there. And that doesn't require, it's not a centralized exchange. Most of the sellers there don't require any kind of know your customer information or anything like that. So that can be a great way to get it if for some reason you can't use a centralized exchange in your country, or it's not listed anywhere in your country or your kind of jurisdiction. And that also helps to, again, protect us against future delistings. The other main platforms that you can use right now is Bisq, which is a decentralized exchange that is mostly used for, or mostly known for, Bitcoin, for buying and selling Bitcoin, but actually is either the second highest or the highest bought and sold coin on Bisq most days, and is at times been 80 to 90% of the volume on Bisq. So that's another way you can acquire Monero, but you can't buy it with fiat. You can't use like US dollars to buy it there. You can only use Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. And then the Monero community is also in the process of building out a platform similar to Bisq called Haveno, and that will allow you to use fiat and use dollars, that kind of thing, to buy Monero directly from other people. So it'll be a system that will work and function and protect your privacy no matter what the legislations are, no matter what jurisdiction you're in.
And since we're talking about privacy, I know you have your own podcast, right? Opt-out podcast. And how would you describe the surveillance capitalism? How does it work?
Yeah, so there are lots of different ways that we're being surveilled and our data is being used either against us or just being stored long-term, just in case. But surveillance capitalism in particular is the ways you see companies like Facebook, we'll use them as an example because they're a prime example, the ways you see them provide a free service, and they have you sign something right when you sign up, nobody reads through it, nobody sees what they're doing. And oftentimes much of the things they do with your data is not disclosed, as we've found out with lots of different things like the Cambridge Analytica leaks. But the data that you provide to that platform, which sometimes is just your public post, which if it's a public post, it's not a big deal. But many times companies like this, like Facebook, they're collecting as much data as possible. They're tracking you across many, many websites that you visit. They have trackers integrated on many websites. They're tracking all of the information you put into your Facebook app, whether that's your status, your location, all of that. They're consuming all of that data for right now to improve their own tool theoretically, but normally it's to sell that data to other third parties that will pay them for that data because they know they're able to use that to target advertisements. They know they're able to use that to either surveil users. It could be law enforcement that are using bot data or something like that. It could be authoritarian governments that are collecting that data from Facebook and demanding it. So it's this concept that has taken over much of the large tech corporations, big tech corporations, where they're consuming users' data, often without their consent or their explicit consent, and using that data against them. So it's important that we understand what we're signing up for when we sign up for these services, what data they're collecting, how they're using it, and being aware that every piece of data we give them is probably being sold, is oftentimes hacked and leaked, and could come back to bite us later. And the things that we do there are usually just logged forever. So we may be doing nothing wrong now, we may be fine now, we may love our government now. But if things shift in the country you're in, much of that data could come back to haunt you because it could be used against you in the future. So it's a very complex topic, but that's kind of a quick intro.
Thank you.
I've got a question. I just want to come back to the previous one. And you know, inflation is really interesting question right now, and this is really crucial. And you said that Monero can protect you against inflation, right? But as far as you know, Monero has like an inflation mechanism in just in the coin, right? And for example, in comparison with Bitcoin, so it's not like that. So the emission of Monero is infinite, right? So it's unlimited. So how can it help? I mean, like how can it protect against inflation? I just want to understand the mechanism.
Yeah, so that's a really common question. It's something that's usually brought up as just kind of a way to dismiss Monero. But there's a few key points there. The first one is that the inflation that's present in Monero is different than like government central bank inflation, because they have complete control over how much they want to print at any time. They can just decide today we're going to print $1 trillion. We're going to use it for whatever we want. And so the inflation rate can change, it can vacillate, it can go up and go down. You never know what the inflation rate will be in the future, and you never know what percentage of the supply of that monetary system you'll have in the future. With Monero, that is not the case. So the inflation rate is set at the beginning. It is not changing. It will not be changed by the community. And that inflation is for a very specific purpose. It's not just mindlessly put in there. The inflation is for something called a tail emission, which essentially just means that when the set supply of Monero, which is 18.4 million Monero, when that's done being mined, similar to how like in Bitcoin, when 21 million Bitcoin are mined, there won't be any more Bitcoin issued, or there'll be a very, very tiny amount essentially. When that 18.4 million is mined in Monero, the tail emission will kick in, which just means that every block there will be 0.6 Monero subsidy for miners forever. So I know that sounds like permanent inflation, but the two things to keep in mind are that it's for the security of the network. So it ensures that if transaction fees are low and they're not enough to compensate miners to provide security to the network, the tail emission will always be there to ensure that miners have something clear, something defined, something they know they will always receive in every block. Whereas Bitcoin, when the 21 million is mined, or as we get closer to that, there will be a very, very small portion of Bitcoin that's produced in each block, eventually almost none. And so miners will have to rely on transaction fees, or they will get nothing or almost nothing for their work mining. So Monero prevents that scenario when Monero gets to that point, which that tail emission will kick in I think it's May this coming year. And that 0.6 Monero per block, it's important that it's a fixed amount of Monero per block. It's not a percentage. So the inflation rate of Monero will be approaching 0% forever. And the inflation rate of Monero is already lower than Bitcoin, lower than gold, and I believe the inflation rate of Monero will be lower until 2040, something like that. And there won't be 21 million Monero in circulation, the same number as Bitcoin, until 2040. So it's important people realize it's a very intentional thing. It's to ensure the security of the network, even if there's not enough transaction fees to secure that. And it is constantly approaching 0% forever. So it is a very, very low inflation percentage, and it's completely predictable. You can know at this block height, at this date, 100 years from now, what will be the total supply of Monero, what percentage of that is mine. You can predict that, you can know that 100%. So it protects you against unseen or hidden or forceful inflation that would cause you to lose money.
Wow. Is there any research on that? Probably we can show some figures to our clients. I mean, like maybe you have research or something, and you can send us a link just after the session.
Yeah. There's a very good, simple site if people want to learn more about the supply aspects of Monero. It's just called monero.supply. So people can definitely go there. It'll give you a good graph that lets you see kind of the differences compared to Bitcoin. It'll give you a really good description and introduction to that tail emission concept. So that's a great supply or a great source if people want to learn more about how the Monero supply works.
Perfect. Thank you. Good. I think we can go ahead to the client's questions, right?
Yeah. Next question. I heard the Monero was founded by a scammer. Is that correct? If yes, can you please tell about this very hilarious story? Same person.
Yeah, so Monero does have a pretty crazy history. I won't get super into the details here, but I'll give y'all some links that you can provide. There's a 4-part series on Reddit that is a really fascinating read through that history of Monero, and there's a timeline that can walk users through what happened as well. But to sum it up really quickly, essentially, CryptoNote, which is the protocol and the code base that Monero was originally built on, was something that it just came out of the blue. It was produced by unknown pseudonyms similar to Bitcoin. We don't know who created it. We don't know who's behind that protocol and that code base. It's unique to Bitcoin, so it's not just a Bitcoin fork or something like that, like many other projects. It's a completely unique code base protocol approach. And that CryptoNote protocol was built out into something called Bytecoin by, again, a group of people we don't know. And they pretended that it was newly launched. I believe in 2012, they pretended that they launched it. But they'd secretly pre-mined 80% of the supply before launching it, and lied on lots of forums and pretended that it had been in use on darknet markets and other places for a long time, when in reality they just mined it in secret and then published it when there was only 20% left of the supply, so that they would already have 80% of the supply going into the release before anyone else was able to mine. So obviously that is a scam. That's something that is very much unethical and was harmful to people who were interested in Bytecoin as a project and as a concept. So Bytecoin was forked in 2014 into what was then called BitMonero. There's some history around who was part of that fork. There's someone called Thankful for Today, who was most likely part of the Bytecoin team and who forked into BitMonero to try to get some more people into the scam. But essentially was taken from him, just kind of restarted and revamped by a group of just community members that decided they loved the approach that the CryptoNote protocol took, but they obviously weren't happy with the pre-mine. They weren't happy with the way that Thankful for Today was running BitMonero. So Monero itself was not started by a scammer per se, but it was started as a weird kind of fork of Bytecoin, which was definitely a scam. But the community really kind of reclaimed and redeemed BitMonero. Eventually became Monero itself. And so there was no pre-mine, there was no ICO, there was no like initial scam or anything like that. It was a fair launch. It was a 100% proof of work mined from the beginning, all of that fun stuff. So it's definitely a crazy history. I definitely advise. I'll give you all some links that you can throw in the show notes. It's a very interesting read for sure, and it's not something many people are aware of.
Neat.
Great. I just wanted to raise a topic about NFTs and DeFi, which are really popular right now. And here is the question from our long-standing customer, Yatim. In the past few months, we've been in boom in the projects that utilize blockchain across DeFi and NFTs. So can you just tell us more about the opportunity which Monero can give to its clients?
Yeah, so there are not necessarily specific integrations with DeFi or NFT that the Monero community themselves are working on. We are very laser focused on building digital cash, on building good money. So our key focus is not the kind of the way that people understand DeFi, but obviously DeFi is something that Monero is. It is decentralized finance. The whole purpose of Monero is to have a decentralized money that we can spend, we can save in, all of that. So it fits into that category, but not in the way that most people think of DeFi today. There are many DeFi platforms that are working on integrating Monero because it has such a passionate user base, because it has so many users, has a massive developer community. So there are platforms like Secret Network that are working on integrating Monero into their DeFi platform. So the Monero community itself is not really working on that kind of thing. And there's no like Monero DeFi thing. There's no staking, no kind of liquidity provision natively to Monero. But again, many platforms are integrating it. No NFTs either that I'm aware of. But again, people can think more of Monero as similar to Bitcoin, and that its focus is money first, and then letting other things be built on top of or around it that will provide services like DeFi is trying to provide, which is decentralized access to those things, decentralized access to tools that we need for our money. And you could really view things like Haveno, the upcoming place to buy and sell Monero, as well as other cryptocurrencies, as a type of DeFi that's being built around Monero, and it uses the Monero network for the fees, for the escrow, for those kinds of things, because of the low fees, because of the strong privacy. It uses that as the base of Haveno. So there are similar things being built out, but maybe not the traditional DeFi that people are aware of.
Can I ask you a question about Bitcoin, actually? There is a comparison between Bitcoin and Monero, right? But, for example, about legalization of Bitcoin in El Salvador and some other countries. So can we have something the same with Monero?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing stopping a country from doing that. Honestly, Monero would be an even better solution than Bitcoin for that type of situation, because it's more censorship resistant than Bitcoin. It's more private by default, so users' privacy would be better protected. The main thing to keep in mind with that type of legal tender situation, and we're already seeing issues in El Salvador. We're seeing large protests and people pushing back against it, because it's forcing Bitcoin usage and acceptance on the citizens, whether they want to use it or not. And I think it's very antithetical to what cryptocurrency stands for, which is a tool that we can opt into using, we can choose to use if we want to, and we can gain a lot of value, we can gain a lot of privacy and freedom through using tools like Monero. But when something is made legal tender, it gets forced onto the citizens, whether they want to or not. So for some people, it will be beneficial. And for many people, if they were forced to use Monero, it would be beneficial. But even if it is beneficial, it's not something that I want to see forced onto anyone against their will. So I honestly hope that doesn't happen. It would obviously be great for Monero acceptance, because then a whole country would be accepting it. I don't want to see people forced into it, even though I see Monero as an amazing tool and a great tool for freedom. So hopefully it will be more organic than a legal tender law that forces its usage. Hopefully it'll be more people realizing, waking up, seeing the need to use a tool that protects their privacy, that allows them to protect themselves against nation-state inflation and surveillance, and they'll choose to use it of their own free will, choose to pull friends and merchants that they like into using it, and just naturally build those things of their own free will.
And it's their choice, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's how it should always be. Even if I think Monero would be great for everyone in the world to be using, it's not something they should be forced into using. And many people, if they don't have good internet access, if they don't have access to a mobile phone or something like that, they could be disadvantaged by a law that enforced Monero usage onto them. So it's definitely something that needs to be opt-in, but hopefully more and more people will choose to opt into using that.
Right. So the next question is about privacy and exchanges. So it's by McCoy-Evans.bit. We have seen centralized exchanges delisting privacy coins. How do you think this is going to affect the growth of Monero?
Yeah, so we talked about the exchange delistings a little bit earlier. The main thing to keep in mind there is, like I said, there are no laws currently against buying, selling, using Monero. I think Japan may be the only country that has any law against that, and they've just banned privacy coins broadly. But outside of that, there are no laws that prevent it. It's just kind of backdoor pressure, or kind of like back channel pressure against banks that exchanges have to use to integrate with the fiat system. And so that pressure causes exchanges to delist it, because they don't want to risk that relationship with their banks being put in danger. So because of that, obviously that could hurt easy access of people to Monero. But something that's really important for people to keep in mind is that using centralized exchanges that rely on, or that are forced to perform Know Your Customer, KYC is the common abbreviation, or anti-money laundering, AML is the common abbreviation there. Using exchanges that are forced to collect and use that info can put your data, can put your privacy at risk, because all of that data that you give to them, they have to then safeguard, they have to also give to the government, and you're at a high risk of that information being leaked and exposed and used fraudulently in the future. And there is very, very, very little actual money laundering or any kind of suspicious financial activity that's stopped by those procedures. There's some really interesting studies out there. Most of them essentially say the cost of KYC AML is extraordinarily high, and the amount of cases that are caught that are fraudulent activity is something like 1% of
Right.
the fraudulent activity that happens because of KYC AML. So essentially it just doesn't work, but it puts your privacy at risk because you have to give all of this private information over. And when you use an exchange like that, that information gets tied to the fact that you bought or sold that cryptocurrency. So if in the future, for instance, if Monero, and this is definitely hypothetical, I don't see this happening, at least not anytime soon, if Monero was banned and anyone who had bought, sold, or held Monero was going to be thrown in jail, if you used a centralized exchange, there would be evidence that you, with all of your personally identifiable information, had bought or sold Monero. Even if you were a perfectly law-abiding citizen, you've done nothing wrong, you just wanted to protect yourself against inflation. Like, no, not criminal, not selling drugs, not doing anything that could be dangerous. Just because you wanted to buy Monero, you could be put in a precarious position there. You could be potentially jailed, or lots of different things could happen. So using decentralized exchanges like the ones I mentioned earlier, like local Monero, like Bisq, like the upcoming Haveno, you're protecting your privacy now, you're protecting yourself in the future, and you're ensuring that those platforms grow and grow and grow, get more liquidity, get more user-friendly because more money is flowing through them. And because those platforms grow, it'll be easier and easier for people to use those platforms to get into and out of Monero. And if those platforms get large enough, it may not matter if centralized exchanges list Monero or not, because it may be easy and simple and low fees and again, free of KYC AML regulations to be able to buy and sell Monero on there. So hopefully people will continue to shift towards decentralized exchanges as they already have. And that will help to make sure that even if centralized exchanges delist Monero, it's not going to cause a problem.
All right.
Thank you so much. That's so detailed answer. I just want to say that we have quite a lot of people who watch us, and just show some comments like that. Thank you so much. I love this wallet. Yeah, we love it too. And that was a question from a user that can you answer? No, I just want to show it. Yeah, for sure. You can ask any questions you like, and I could show it on the screen. For example, like this one. My question, finding investors is hard. Keeping investors is harder. So what strategy does Monero have enough to make investors trust, and with Monero project go a long way?
So first off, the focus of Monero is not really finding investors. The focus of Monero is not making the price of Monero go up. That is something that happens as we organically grow, as the community grows, as usage grows, as people realize the need for financial privacy. Those kinds of things happen organically, but there are definitely organizations, there are groups like Sweetwater Consulting is a group that focuses on helping to show investors and show high-profile clients the importance that Monero can have to them, both as a tool to use, to spend, and as a tool to save money in a way that protects their financial privacy, even more than something like Bitcoin. So there are definitely investors that are obviously choosing to buy Monero, choosing to use Monero, choosing to support Monero by donating to the community, by donating to developers, helping to fund different projects. There are definitely many that are involved. It's not a central focus, but it naturally draws people, and there are definitely there are entities within the Monero community that are working on pulling in kind of the typical investor to help support the Monero community to gain the access to Monero that they need for their own use, and just help to drive Monero forward.
Thank you. Yeah, probably it's time just to speak about transactions. There were some really good questions about Monero transactions.
Yeah. From Marcos Zog, it's how many transactions per second Monero hits?
Yeah, so this is it's one that I see come up pretty frequently from especially people who are newer to the cryptocurrency space. Some cryptocurrencies try to tout their transactions per second as a selling point and the reason that their currency is better or works better, is better for everyone. An important thing to keep in mind, though, is that as something like transactions per second increases, the load on the network and the ability for the network to remain decentralized gets more and more difficult, because every one of those transactions requires processing every one of those transactions requires inclusion in a block. Every one of those transactions requires storage space. So something that claims a million transactions per second usually is going to be an extremely centralized, extremely small network of people who can actually validate and add blocks to the network and all of those kinds of things. So usually when projects are claiming a very high transaction per second amount, it's because they're centralizing things. They're not letting everyone run a node. They're not letting everyone mine. And that allows them to, just like a company that's processing transactions, it allows them to very easily process high amounts of transactions. That's not always the case because they're layer 2 networks that, again, are not blockchains. They're layer 2 that's built on top of a blockchain. And those things can allow you to have much higher transactions per second. And those types of layer 2 networks could be built on Monero as well. But Monero technically doesn't have a transaction per second limit because Monero implemented something called dynamic block size, which essentially means that unlike Bitcoin, which has just a fixed block size, there is always only so much block space in each block. It will not grow. It will not increase. You can only process a certain amount of transactions per day and no more. There's no way to process more. Monero implemented something called a dynamic block size, which essentially just allows the Monero block size and does some fun math to make sure that the fees in those transactions make sense for miners to include. It protects against a few different attacks that could be done, but essentially allows the block size to grow if there is demand at the moment, and allows the block size to decrease. Essentially just making sure that the fee market remains intact, making sure that we don't have people just mindlessly bloating the blockchain, which if someone puts through 1 million transactions right now, everyone in the future who wants to sync a Monero node or sync their wallet will have to dig through those 1 million transactions. So we want to make sure that people have to pay fees to use the network. It's just a gate to make sure that people are not doing anything suspicious, aren't flooding the network. And because of those fees, the dynamic block size just helps to make sure that we can handle increased load. Like, for instance, a Christmas shopping rush where people are using Monero, where suddenly we have 10 times the volume we normally do. The block size can dynamically adapt to that. Fees will remain reasonable throughout. There won't be a massive fee crisis throughout that. And then the block size can come back down so that fees will be reasonable again when the normal transaction value is happening. So it's a cool feature that allows for theoretically infinite transactions per second. But again, if we're growing a layer 1 blockchain like Monero that quickly, there are going to be other problems. So it's important for, if there is a future in which we need to do 1 million transactions per second in Monero, which would be awesome. Yeah. Hopefully we'll have a layer 2 at that point where we can not have to store every transaction in perpetuity.
Great.
We've got some news from our clients, actually. So here it is. About Bitcoin, so it crossed 50,000. Yeah, what about Monero? Yeah, if you have any news about Monero, so just let us know. Yeah, so just somebody want to say hi. Yeah, how you doing? Just another user. And there is a really brilliant question, so I just really want to ask you. Here it is. That's a really tricky one, but still. How could we change this year of privacy coin is for illegal stuff? So I think we just need to answer that. We just need to, I think, and I'm sure that we can change something, right? So we are here to change.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's one that I am spending a lot of time, both in my normal educational content on Twitter, on my blog, on my podcast, focusing on helping people see that privacy is not just for criminals, that privacy is not just for people who do things that are illegal at the moment. But privacy is very simply the ability for you to selectively reveal yourself to the world. So it's you getting to choose how much you reveal about yourself, if you reveal who you are, if you reveal your gender, your face, if you reveal your financial transactions. The key of privacy is that it's giving you the ability to choose how much you reveal and to whom. So it can be something, obviously criminals do want privacy because they realize that privacy is extremely important. For them, it could be life or death. For us in countries like, obviously I'm in the US, so in the US, there normally aren't cases where I'm going to be put in jail or killed or persecuted for like religious beliefs or anything like that. At the moment, obviously that could change rapidly. And we've seen many countries that are free for a time quickly change their views, quickly become authoritarian, quickly have transitions of power that cause a crackdown on specific groups, on specific religions, on specific approaches to life. And if people do not preserve their privacy right now, even though they're not doing anything wrong right now, they could be at risk in the future because their specific views, their specific identity, their specific look could be something that could be dangerous in the future if they don't protect that. So it is definitely like privacy is something that criminals realize the need for because they see how important it is to them and to the things that they're doing. Whether those things are unethical or it's just something that shouldn't be illegal there, like selling a Bible in China or something like that. There are lots of things that are illegal but aren't necessarily wrong, and those people need their privacy too. Yeah, it's just important that people realize it's the ability for you to selectively reveal yourself to the world. And it's something, obviously, I'm a huge fan of Monero. I dedicate hundreds, thousands of hours to Monero, to education around it, to helping others in the community. And I do that because I see that people need access to a tool like Monero who aren't criminals. And while criminals probably use Monero, that's just because it's a great tool, and that's a sign that it's a good tool. But people need to realize that using Monero, for instance, daily is something that can protect them against future persecution, against future attack. And it could even be as simple as just protecting you against the old $5 wrench attack. If you're using Bitcoin, for instance, and you keep all of your Bitcoin in one wallet, you use that to pay for something, the merchant could see how much Bitcoin you have in your wallet, and they could have a friend that's not a very nice guy that could swing by your house later because they trace that, and maybe they have your address from your receipt or from some shipping order that you've put through, and they track you down and attack you to get that Bitcoin because of that. Something like Monero, which provides financial privacy, would protect you. And so there are lots of ways that privacy is important, that it's not just for people who are doing illegal things. But a key for me is realizing that the things that are not illegal today, whether that's, again, a religion, gender, lots of different things, the things that are not illegal or persecuted today could very easily shift to being illegal tomorrow. So if you take the steps to protect your own privacy today, you can make sure that if there are big shifts in the government, if there are authoritarian bents in the government, if there is some big world event that changes things rapidly, as we've seen over the past couple of years, you are protected against that when that happens, rather than realizing in the moment, oh crap, I really need to worry about my privacy.
When it's too late,
Yeah, and hopefully for most people it won't be too late until they realize, and they'll make the changes they need to. But it could be too late if you realize in the middle of some kind of authoritarian takeover that you've never cared about your privacy and all of your views and all of your financial data is out there. It could be very detrimental. So it's important you start taking steps down that journey towards personal privacy now, in many ways, not just cryptocurrency. There are lots of general ways that you can improve your personal privacy.
So true, yeah, so true. I just want to add that, I think that every kind of cryptocurrency can be used for legal purposes, right? And it's not only about Monero, so we can say the same about Bitcoin or just any other cryptocurrency. So true. But can I ask you just to think in opposite way? Just we are speaking about illegal purposes, right? But can we say something about like business purposes? Like, I don't know, like three great points about Monero which can help business.
Yeah. I mean, the same reasons that criminals use Monero to protect their financial privacy is the reason that businesses use Monero. It's the reason that merchants use Monero. It's the reason that free open source projects are overwhelmingly switching to accepting donations in Monero. Those that accept cryptocurrency are quickly migrating to accepting Monero because it's so much easier to accept in a private way. I think it's important with Bitcoin, if you don't take extra steps, you're going to struggle to maintain your privacy. And for instance, for a business, if you're using Bitcoin and you don't use it properly, you could expose the suppliers that you're using, you could expose your costs per month, you could expose lots of information to maybe a competitor, and they're able to see the suppliers you're using, they're able to see how much you're spending per month, they can undercut you, they can give the supplier you're using a better deal because they know how much you're spending and try to take that relationship over. There are lots of ways that, businesses value financial privacy today. That is something they care about, and they use means often that aren't accessible to normal people to protect their wealth, to protect their privacy. The Monero is something that's great because not only do merchants accepting it protect their own privacy, they also protect the privacy of the people that are spending Monero at their business, at their shop. Because when I spend Monero at an online shop, they get no financial details about previous transactions. They get no financial details about the amount of Monero that I own or have used in the past. They have no financial details about other ways that I spend or use Monero. So it allows me to spend Monero without worrying about privacy. I know that when I'm using Monero, I'm getting very strong privacy guarantees. And it's really a freeing thing, and it's something that's causing more and more merchants to rapidly adopt Monero. There's a growing list, well over 1,000 merchants now, and I think CryptWork is the name of the website, but I can get the URL after. There are dozens of free and open source projects that are accepting Monero for donations. Obviously, I have accepted Monero for donations for a long time. Some other good legal use cases and like great use cases are in the Monero community. Everybody who wants to work full time on Monero or wants to knock out a project or wants to build out something, all of that generally goes through community funding via donations. So like any project that's being built on Monero, like Havano that we talked about, Havano is completely funded by Monero community donations, as well as a donation by Samurai Wallet, a Bitcoin privacy wallet. But it's mostly funded by community donations. And so people are choosing to give their Monero freely to others in the community, to projects in the community, to build and improve Monero. So there are many, many great positive legal use cases today. And I mean, it's very possible that that's the majority of the usage of Monero. But due to Monero's privacy, it's not easy to tell. So we can't really see what's going on in Monero like we can in Bitcoin. It's not simple and straightforward to trace and get a picture of what Monero is being used for, because it protects everyone's privacy by default.
All right. Greg?
We can have the next question actually about smart contracts, because our clients are really interested in that. So will it be implemented in the near future?
So smart contracts specifically are not possible on Monero right now, but they could be something that's built out in the future. And like I said before, the focus of Monero is building out decentralized digital cash. It's building out money that can be used by people, that can be used in platforms that support smart contracts. So it's not something that's technically supported right now. Again, even because Monero is a separate code base. It's not even a Bitcoin fork. It has some differences in how you would integrate it into a platform compared to Bitcoin or its many forks. So there can be some complexities there, but there are certain things that can be built on Monero today. There's also some really promising developments in the kind of the future of Monero's protocol. Like for instance, a protocol called Seraphis, which is the one that's currently being explored for kind of the next generation transaction protocol in Monero. That would allow a lot more complex things like layer 2 networks like Lightning, other kind of simpler things. Not true smart contracts like you think of it on Ethereum, because there are many disadvantages to integrating something like that on a blockchain network. But we're making sure that we build in tools and abilities within Monero that will enable us to build out required things in the future. Like a layer 2 is a very likely thing that will be built on top of Monero, probably in the relatively near future. And so right now that could be done in some unique ways, but to simplify it, that will be definitely a focus of future transaction protocols to try and ensure that while maintaining every user's privacy by default, we'll build in tools that will allow more complex things to be built on top of Monero specifically.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's time. Just we can have probably 2 or 3 more questions, right?
Because yeah, we got a question from Clayton. Are there any big projects planned with XMR?
Yeah, so I think a few of the biggest are Havano, like I mentioned, which is a decentralized exchange that's being built out. It's going to be very important for allowing people to easily get in and out of Monero without surveillance, without issues if their country doesn't support it or there's no exchange that supports it that they can use. So Havano is a very big one that's coming. Another big one is what I just mentioned. We're in the process right now of figuring out what the kind of the next steps of improving the transaction protocol within Monero will be. The kind of front runners right now are something called Seraphis and something called Lelantis Spark. And those two essentially would just allow Monero to improve the privacy of each transaction quite a bit without improving or without increasing the size of every transaction and storage space, without increasing the verification time, without increasing fees, that kind of thing. So it's an important thing, and it's something that Monero is we understand in the Monero community that privacy is a constant arms race. It's something where you're never just done and you've built a perfect privacy tool and you don't have to worry. It's something that you constantly have to be improving and iterating on and doing new research and reading new research and continuing to improve things. So the next protocol that we go to will be another step towards improving user privacy and just making sure we stay ahead in the arms race, essentially. Monero's privacy right now is excellent, but obviously it can be improved, and we're going to keep improving it while maintaining those core tenets of decentralization, of the privacy first ethos. So that's definitely a big one. I guess another big thing that's just recently kicked off is something that's called P2 pool. And it's something that's been around for Bitcoin for a while, but has never really taken off within the Bitcoin mining community. But someone has kind of rebuilt P2 pool and built it from the ground up for Monero. And essentially what P2 pool allows you to do is it allows miners to mine and work together to mine Monero, similarly to how centralized pools work. But it allows them to do that in a way that has zero fees. So there are no pool fees, nothing like that. And it allows every single miner to build the actual block template. And the block template is essentially just what tells the network, if I mine this block successfully, these are the transactions to include. And because P2 pool allows every miner to build that transaction template themselves, it protects the network against any kind of censorship in the future. It protects the miners that are using that pool from any kind of custodial risk. Like if you're using a centralized pool, hopefully they keep paying out to you. But in a centralized pool, they get all of the funds from the mining, and then theoretically they pay out to you. But obviously there's some risk there that the pool could choose not to pay out to you, could just run away with the funds, things like that. And that has happened in the past. So P2 pool makes it so that every miner builds that template, and every miner builds it in a way that pays every other miner who's mining on that P2 pool. And so they each get paid directly from the block. So when a block is mined by a P2 pool, it pays out every miner that contributed during that time frame, and that earned a share, which just means they did enough work to prove that they earned a piece of that block. And so just make sure that you don't have to worry about custodial risk with pools. It also removes the ability for pool operators to censor transactions, to mine empty blocks, to do any kind of thing like that. And it removes the ability for pools to perform any kind of 51% attack, because the pool operator, there is none in P2 pool. It's completely decentralized. The pool operator in a normal pool could choose to perform a few different attacks to leverage their hash power, to work with maybe another pool and work together to attack the network. But if a large portion of the network is using P2 pool, which is already a quite large portion of the network using it, it removes that power from pool operators and ensures that mining remains decentralized while still giving you more regular payouts than if you were doing like solo mining, for instance. So it's a really important advancement. It's something that obviously if you're not a miner, you may not be too worried about. But if you're not someone who mines Monero, or not someone who mines in general, just know that it means that Monero is much more decentralized. It's much more secure than it would have been without P2 pool. And I'm hopeful that will continue to grow, increase in usage, increase in visibility. And I've been working on creating some tools and guides to help people mine via P2 pool, because it does require you to run your own Monero node as well. So it definitely adds some complexity over normal mining, but I've tried to make it as simple as possible. And the tools that have been built out by the community, in particular by someone who goes by Sec1, SECH1, he built P2 pool from the ground up, and the tools that have been built are really just incredible. So it's great to see the Monero community continuing to stay focused on privacy and on decentralization.
Awesome.
Yeah, I just want to show the comment. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I think we have a last question, and there will be another one just from us. That's our traditional one. Yeah. So the first one is society. So how your project can help the society. So probably you can say some words about it. Something really global.
Yeah, I mean it's very straightforward. People need access to financial privacy, and they need access to inflation-proof money and money that will protect them against nation-state inflation, against hyperinflation. And Monero can be both of those things. The most important to me is the financial privacy, because we live in a world where our privacy is constantly being eroded, whether that be by the companies that we use, whether that be by our banks, whether that be by the governments that we live under. All of those entities are trying to consistently increase their surveillance, increase their visibility into the things that we do every day, whether or not we're a criminal. It doesn't matter anymore. They don't just surveil criminals. They don't just surveil theoretically bad people. They surveil everyone, and they're constantly increasing that and constantly pushing the boundary. So Monero is to me, an incredibly important project to society, because it allows many other things to succeed that wouldn't otherwise, because people can have access to financial privacy and to censorship resistance and to protection against inflation in a way that governments can't stop. They can't prevent. The decentralization ensures that it's something that can't just be simply turned off or turned on. So it's very important that people have access to financial privacy, and when they have access to tools like Monero, many other things can be built out. If you're in an authoritarian country that's cracked down on many things, for instance, if they've cracked down on your religion, maybe you couldn't buy your Bible or your religious text otherwise, but because of Monero, you can. Or maybe you're fleeing the country because it's oppressive and they're targeting your specific people group. Before, you'd have to leave all of your money behind, all of your valuables behind, because you're not going to be able to get that across the border. But with Monero, all you have to do is remember that seed phrase, and you could have all of your wealth in Monero cross the border. You're good to go. It's not something that can be taken from you, not something that can be surveilled or seen. And when you use it afterwards, it's not something that can be traced either, even if they know that you had Monero on the other side. Financial privacy is really, it's an undergirding to many other aspects of society. And if we have financial privacy, and really if we have privacy generally, we're able to preserve and maintain other freedoms much, much more easily. So it's very, very important that people have access to tools like Monero.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Actually, we a little bit ran out of time, so probably you can choose the best question, and then we can ask you the traditional one.
I think to me the best question was the one about is privacy just for criminals? I think that's it's a very important, pressing question that more people need to think deeply about and consider. So I think that's probably the one that jumps out to me. I know that's not specifically about Monero, but it very much directly applies to Monero, because that is a common argument against Monero, is that only criminals care about financial privacy and only criminals use Monero, which is both wrong and obviously dangerous to our future freedoms. So I think that was probably the best question for me. Thank you to who asked that.
Great. One XMR goes to the owner of this question. Yeah, and our last question to you, it's really traditional one. What would you do if you had a superpower in the crypto world?
That's a tricky one. I think, honestly, I'm someone who gets very upset and frustrated by scams and projects that are lying or hurting their own users or not taking privacy seriously. So honestly, if I had a superpower, it would just be getting rid of the scams and attempts by different people in the space to lie or dissuade people from the truth, or dissuade them from using good tools. So yeah, that'd probably be it. Just knocking out scams so that people can focus on the good use cases, the cryptocurrency that can provide, and the good tools that are out there, because there are great ones like Monero. There are others, but just getting rid of, I guess, the chaff and letting everyone focus on the good stuff.
Thank you so much.
All right.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, David and Greg.
It's been a pleasure.
Hope to see you again. Thank you, and bye-bye.
See ya.
You have a good one.
You too.